Welcome to the Exploring Careers in Innovation series. This episode is titled Product Manager Role, Ideal for Liberal Arts Students. My name is Adam Wisco. I'm a class of 2022 computer science major at Middlebury College, and I would like to introduce this episode's guest speaker. I'm joined today by Caroline Goodwin, class of 2014, Senior Product Manager at PlacePass, a digital marketplace for travelers. Welcome, and thanks for joining us, Caroline.
Thanks so much, Adam. Excited to chat with you today.
So this series explores a number of different functional areas involved in financing and early stage ventures. This episode in particular focuses on the product manager role. Could you start by just telling us a little bit about your organization and what you do in your role?
Definitely. So I work for a startup in the travel space called PlacePass. And PlacePass has built an e-commerce marketplace of tours and activities all over the world. So basically anything that you would do once you get to a place where you're traveling. And we partner with hospitality companies like Marriott International to bring that marketplace to their loyalty members. At PlacePass, I'm a senior product manager. So that means that I'm responsible for helping drive the roadmap, figuring out what features that we want to build, coordinating with our engineering team to actually build and execute on those features, and then a variety of other things, including conducting user research, analyzing results, and also working directly with our CEO to come up with our longer term business strategy and what makes sense as we build new products.
That all sounds very cool. There's a lot going on there. Do you want to kind of break it down into the separate pieces? So what, with each of those different pieces of what you do, what actually goes into that?
Yeah. So my day, every day looks a little bit different depending on which piece I'm working on. So one thing that's consistent is every day I liaison and coordinate with our engineering team. So I attend what we have is called a daily stand-up, where the engineers meet for 10 to 15 minutes every morning. We run through what each engineer is working on, what features they have, and if there are any questions or blockers to their work that day. And during that is really when I check in on my engineers. It's more of a project management type role where I check in with them and make sure, are they building the things I'm asking them to build? Are they doing all the requirements? So an example would be if you're trying to search for activity in Middlebury, Vermont, and you want to make sure this activity can happen if it's snowing outside, and I'm having them build a snow or winter activity feature. It doesn't really work if there's no weather component in there. So working with them to make sure that they build that correctly, that we're using all the right data and get that done. And so I am constantly talking with them about the requirements and also talking with them about what's the best way to build this thing. So that's one chunk of my day. On a typical day, I also would maybe do something called user research, where I always want to be checking in with our customers directly to see what problems are they having, what needs do they have, and what could we be doing to make our experience and our product better for them. So I might be doing things like doing interviews or reading over customer support cases and emails or phone calls that come in, or I do a variety of called user testing, where I set up different tests online and have people go step by step, try different things out, see where they struggle, see what they like, what they don't like with the new feature. So I might be doing some of that. I might also be doing some strategic work where I'll go into meetings and talk with our business team or our CEO about what are the goals we have for the company. Are we trying to get more revenue? Or are we trying to get more users? Are we trying to retain people, get people that come back time over time, and figuring out, okay, what's our main goal? And then once we have that goal, what do we need to do to make the goal better or achieve the goal? And so that leads into roadmap planning and product discovery of, once we have this goal figured out, let's plan and think through what are different ideas that we could do, scope out how hard they would be to actually achieve or build, and then come up with a plan to actually do it. So those are kind of some of the main functions that I work in every day.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, sounds like a lot of stuff going on, and working with a lot of different people and a lot of different teams and groups. So communication obviously is one key skill. What are some other of like key skill sets, character traits of being a successful product manager?
Yeah, so communication is absolutely number one. I have to be able to communicate both verbally and written. So product managers are in tons of meetings, and we also write out tons of information that we need our engineers to understand. Besides that, though, some of the other important things would be data analysis. So you don't have to be a superstar data analyst or be able to code in R or anything like that, but you do need to be able to look at either whether it's basic Google Analytics or there are some other data tools and say, oh, it looks like, be able to understand, are we getting more revenue, or what is a conversion rate, or are users using this feature, and be able to analyze that data to figure out if what you're doing actually makes sense. You can start with basic Excel skills, is really helpful for that. You also need to have really good time management skills. So product managers are in meetings lots of the time, but you also have work to do outside of that. So you need to be able to plan your time out to be able to achieve all the things you're trying to in a day. And then problem solving is honestly one of the biggest things that I have to do. So it's critical thinking skills, it's problem solving, it's being able to look for different solutions to any problems that you might have. And that's not necessarily like a math problem exactly. You don't need to tell your engineer, oh, I need you to build it in XYZ framework or code. I don't know how to code. I was not a computer science major, but I can talk to my engineers and say, we have this problem. Could you build this thing? Because I think it might be a solution, and then talk through the pros and cons of different ways to build that out. And at Middlebury, you have to do this a lot in your classes when you're doing various cases or writing papers and you're figuring out what's the solution to a problem and then coming up with different options.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds like a cool skill set and something that does fit really well with being a liberal arts major at Middlebury College, right? All those things are a lot of the things that we do try and work on at Mid, which I'm sure you can attest to, but we'll get to that later. What are some of the challenges you encounter on like a daily basis or on a regular basis, I should say?
Yeah, so the biggest challenge that I deal with on a regular basis is there are constant trade-offs and difficult decisions to be made. So a lot of times my engineers might want to build one thing, my CEO wants to build another thing, and my customer support team wants to build a third thing, let alone what some of our big external partnerships and clients want. And so you're constantly juggling what's going to be the right thing, what's going to be the most impactful thing, and having to prioritize and say no to people when their idea isn't going to work right now. And that might not be a bad idea, it's just not something that you can build at that time. So that is always challenging because there's way more ideas of things that we could be doing than I have engineers and resources to actually build. So that is hard. And then I think the other challenge is sometimes I have to be able to translate technical concepts to non-technical people. So I didn't come, like I said, I don't have a computer science degree, but I'm self-taught. You can learn. That's another good skill. If you're a quick learner, you can learn almost anything and figure it out. I've learned how to talk to my engineers and understand what they're talking about, but then I have to translate what they explain to me to something that a business person might need to understand, and they're not in the technical aspect day to day. And that can be challenging at times when my CEO really, really wants something, but then we have to figure out it won't work technically for XYZ reason and have to come up with another solution and be able to explain that in a way that makes sense for the business.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of the first challenge, in terms of, picking things to prioritize, what are some of the steps that you take sometimes to kind of go about prioritizing certain things? Is it, what needs to be done, what should be done first, what's going to, have the biggest impact? What kind of steps do you take to do that?
Yeah, so there's a couple different steps that I can take to do that, and it depends on exactly what question I'm trying to answer in the prioritizing. But one of the things that every product manager should do is try to look at your data, and if you can estimate what's going to be the impact of this feature that we want to build, and try to estimate what's going to be the estimated impact, whether that is it going to be better revenue, is it going to be increased retention rates, and figuring that out, and then look at what's going to be the cost. Is there something that is going to be really high value, but it's also going to cost us a month or 2 months of engineering time versus something that still also has a good impact, but it'll only take 2 days to build? I look at those, so do kind of a cost benefit analysis. And then I also use a framework called a SWOT analysis, which stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And you kind of plot each feature or option that you're considering on this framework and figure out what are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to each one. And if one has a really risky, like lots of threats, but not as many opportunities, then that's a really easy way to just throw it out and say, good idea, but we don't have, it's not going to work right now. We can't prioritize it. And so I've seen my business and a couple other businesses do it this way. There are other frameworks that you can use to help prioritize things, like an opportunity solution tree, or a different framework called MISI, or mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. That one's a consulting framework, but is very helpful also from a product mindset of trying to think through what are going to be the best benefits for you and helping prioritize and what's going to make the most impact for the business.
Awesome. That sounds really cool. So we're talking about a lot of different frameworks, a lot of methodologies, a lot of steps. So there are obviously a lot of those, and I just know from looking at being a product manager, there are a lot of frameworks. There are a lot of different, here's how you to prioritize, here's how to, approach this problem. And one thing you mentioned earlier was like your daily stand-up meeting. What are some other, like buzzwords or key terminology that product managers use?
Yes, there are a bunch. So on kind of the metrics side of the house, or goal setting, there are two that I use all the time, which are, one is an OKR, which stands for an objective and key result. A lot of companies use these to set their goals on a quarterly or yearly basis. And so you set, like, I want to achieve this thing, and this is how I'm going to measure it. Similar to that is a KPI, which is a key performance indicator, and all product managers will have KPIs that their performance is measured against. So it's basically saying, if I am responsible for increasing revenue, my KPI is probably going to be increasing revenue, and my goal will be to increase it by 10%. Did I or did I not achieve that goal in the last quarter? Another buzzword we use a lot would be UX UI, which is user experience or user interface. The user interface is basically, if you're working with a web application, it's like what you see on a website, what you actually interact with and click with, and the user experience is how you actually click. Like, where do you have to click? Is it easy? Is it hard? How do you actually get through and navigate a product? Those are a couple. There's a ton more, but those are some of the main ones that you'll hear on a pretty daily basis.
Awesome. You've mentioned some stuff about features and product. If you're not someone who, is a software engineer or is a programmer, a lot of people that I've talked to at least, don't really understand, what product are you managing? So when you say like features, what does that actually mean? Like, what are you actually working on?
Yeah. So at PlacePass, I actually manage 3 different products, which is unusual for a product manager. That's something that's more of an early stage startup thing. But when I mean products, so we have a website that's dedicated just to buying these tours and activities, and the entire website is my product. I also manage a product that has to do with rental car bookings, and that is an entirely separate, basically, website. It's its own product where the entire thing related to rental cars is a product. And so within those products are made up of different features. And so in my main tours and activities product, a feature we have is search. And that literally means, how can I search for different tours and activities across the world? A different feature would be filtering. Can I filter them based on category, or can I filter them based on the reviews or ratings? And each one of those is an individual feature that we had to build. So when you're looking at a website, most different things on the website are probably features. So when I was at Middlebury, and it might not be the same anymore, I remember I used to go look up the menus all the time at like go/menu. And in some ways, if you're trying to pick, am I going to go to Procter? Am I going to go to Ross? The product itself is figuring out, like, here are the menus. I'm offering them up to the students so they can pick which one they want to use. And a feature within that would be when they added the ability where you could click different days of the week and only see the menu for that specific day. And that's like a date feature of only being able to see a specific day or a specific location if I just wanted to see Procter's menu and I didn't really care about Ross.
I think that's such a abstract thing for a lot of people to think about is, they go on a website or they're using an app and they kind of forget that someone actually had to build that, and people actually have to decide how that should be built and stuff like that. And I think that's so if you could describe essentially product management in like one sentence, a couple sentences, how would you describe it?
So product management in 2 sentences would be coming up with what different ideas of things to build with your business team, and then actually building them and getting them out onto whether it's a website or an app, putting them out in the world for someone to actually use. And that's the basics of it, is thinking through, here's a problem, this is what I want to build to solve the problem, and then actually getting some other people to build it, because you can't necessarily build it on your own.
Very cool. Awesome. I want to touch back on something that you mentioned before about how you're actually in charge of 3 different products essentially, and how you mentioned how that's more of like an early stage type thing, could you, I don't know, I don't believe you've worked at a larger company as a product manager, but in terms of working as one at a early stage company versus, maybe a larger company, what would those differences be?
Yeah, so I've only worked at startups in the past, but the biggest difference between an early stage startup and a larger company, based on the friends and colleagues that I've talked to, is at an early stage startup, things change really quickly and your role might be more general and vague, versus if you're working at a larger, more established tech company or any company really, you might be really focused. So if you are a PM at Facebook, for example, you might focus only on the different building out and improving how people like or react to different posts. And that's the only thing that you work on and think about, is how can I get more people to engage with and like things. At a startup, I don't have the luxury of being able to focus all of my time into a very specific, whether it's a feature or part of our product, because we're still trying to achieve what's called product market fit, meaning we haven't necessarily gotten successful enough yet to make it big. And so we're still trying to figure out what's the best problem that we're trying to solve. So due to the COVID-19 crisis, we work in travel. Most people have stopped traveling, which makes it really hard to be in the tours and activities business. So we just added a 3rd product on, where we're trying to encourage people to take staycations and help them find local getaways where they might only drive an hour to 2 or 3 hours away from where they live, rather than going on a big week-long, whether domestic or international vacation. And because I work at a startup, that means I was pretty quickly pulled off of, let's not think about tours and activities right now and start thinking about this staycation or hotel product. And then I need to understand all of what that would mean, rather than just thinking about, am I only looking to drive somewhere? I need to help think through like the customer service team or the marketing team and figure out what all of their needs are, in addition to just talking about the engineering team. And at bigger companies, there tend to be more people to do the additional research for you, and you're more focused on just executing, thinking about your one part and getting that out the door.
Awesome. Yeah, cool. It's a very different experience, obviously, but it sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think it depends on what you like. So I have discovered that I like having a big picture of what everyone in my company is doing and understanding how that all fits together. But some people really like being able to say, I really owned this thing and I really improved this one piece. And I like having the structure and the stability that a bigger company offers. And both of those are totally valid. There are pros and cons to each one, and it depends whether you want to feel like you want to be a little bit more risky, or not risky, but have this wild ride where there'll be lots of ups and downs, then it might work, it might not. Or if you want to be a little more stable and a little bit more, I really want to focus, I really want to be able to show my results really well. And they're both valid.
Cool. Very cool. Awesome. That all sounds great. That's, I think, product management in a good 15-20 minute summary. So product management, the liberal arts, the whole point is that they go together very well. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about your own experience going from campus being a senior and you majored in international and global studies to actually getting this role? What did that pathway look like? What were your experiences?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I was an international and global studies major. Never thought that I was going to work in tech, to be honest. I thought when I graduated, when I was a senior, that I wanted to go into international development work and work for a nonprofit, and was really interested in going down that path. So when I graduated and left Middlebury, I got a year-long fellowship at a nonprofit in San Francisco, and working for a small mental health based nonprofit. And when I got there, after a couple of months, realized that I hated the nonprofit world. I was used to at Middlebury having challenging problems to work on and lots of things to do. And not that you always had to be on, but having interesting things to think about and work on. And at the nonprofit, found out that things were very bureaucratic. We were really limited in what we could do with our funding. We couldn't really try new ideas, and it didn't feel like there was enough for me to do or learn. And so I started looking for new jobs. And being in San Francisco, the primary industry is in tech. So thought about what are things that I like to do, realized I like to travel. So I looked for travel tech jobs and landed at a startup called Peak. I actually started out in customer support, like technical support. So I would answer the phones, emails, chats for their clients, which were small business owners. And then kind of worked my way up through there. So Peak was a startup and I ended up wearing a lot of different hats. So I did the customer support, but I also did account onboarding where I would teach new clients how to actually set up an account and use it. I did some work in their payments and fraud department because we needed it. Did some stuff in marketing and ultimately ended up getting a really good understanding for the product that Peak had built and started working with the product team to help them both deal with difficult, larger clients who wanted specific things, but also running what were called beta releases. So we would launch a new feature. I would communicate with a group of clients and see if this feature worked for them, if they liked it, what their feedback was. And I worked my way into product from there. I really enjoyed it, but ended up taking some time off of Peak, traveled around the world for 6.5 months. And when I came back, got a new job in the same industry because I was already really familiar with the travel industry at PlacePass and have now been there doing product with them for a little over 2 years.
Awesome. Very cool. That sounds like a lot of great experience. And I mean, one cool thing is that you went and your first job was something you realized you didn't want to do, which I know is something that a lot of people talk about is finding what you don't want to do necessarily just as much as figuring out what you do want to do. So that's awesome. Was there a defining moment, maybe other than, at Peak when you started working on different things, when that put you on your current path that like made you think like, oh, I really want to do this now? Yeah,
I think there was actually a defining moment when I was at Peak specifically, where I started working on, basically it came down to, I started working with some specific clients. They had some very specific needs. And I said, I really want to build them out. I think this would be beneficial for both this specific client, but for like our entire customer base. And so started talking directly with the engineering team and with the product manager at the time about like, what do we need to do to make this happen? How can I help you get the data you need to do this? And it was kind of a defining moment where when I saw that realized and actually like come out into the world and people started using this feature, it was really cool. I was like, whoa, I really liked this. I really liked being a part of this, seeing something that an idea I had actually go out into the world and have people use it was pretty cool.
Given your experiences and given what you know now, what advice can you give to current students on how to best prepare themselves for entry points into early stage ventures and product management, either or?
Yeah, so I have a couple of different answers to this question. One is just job advice in general. So when you're a senior at Middlebury or really even for internships, you should not be afraid to use the Middlebury network, whether it's through the CCI, LinkedIn, absolutely 100% reach out to alums and just ask them about their roles. I've gotten both of my jobs through networking. Pretty much everyone I know actually gets their job through networking rather than through just blindly applying online, and you should absolutely do that. Specific to product management, things that you can do now are start thinking about how things you do on a day-to-day basis actually work in a product mindset. So there are definitely projects that you worked on at Middlebury that you can show that you use product management skills. So one that comes to mind for me was I was in an intro to geography course at Middlebury, and I worked on a group project where we had to investigate some sort of local industry and give a presentation on it. And my group chose to write about cheese making in Vermont. And some of the skills around that, working on that project that are related to product management is teamwork. So I had to coordinate with our team members about what did we actually want to write about. Leading that, we had to coordinate visits out to go visit these cheesemakers and coordinated a field trip for our class. So some of those are communicating, coordinating. We had to deliver the product, which in this case was our paper or presentation, on time and make sure that it actually met all the criteria that we had set out in the rubric from our professor. And so thinking through like any projects that you're working on, if you're working on any events or helping organize clubs or sports or anything like that, that can show leadership or communication skills, all of those things are helpful. I think for me, also getting into product management, something that helps, and this is a little bit more general career as well, is wherever you're working at, especially if you're interested in startups, just be willing to say yes. Like there might be a project that is totally out of your wheelhouse that you don't know anything about. But if you are willing to say like, yes, I'll give it a try and I'll ask if I need help, not being afraid to ask help, but going for it and saying like, I'll help this out, I'll help you out with this, you'll end up getting so many more skills that are helpful in product. Half the time, you just need to be able to look things up. And by showing the initiative and being willing to try it, that puts you in a really good spot, especially if you want to get into startups.
Awesome. So you touched on a couple different skills there, and we talked a little bit about skill sets at the start. In terms of skills or experiences that a student could get right now at Middlebury, are there any skills or experiences that come to mind that you think could help them to become a product manager?
Yeah. So I think while you're at Middlebury, if there are any, whether it's courses or projects, like ways that you can work into existing classwork that you already have, start practicing like data analysis skills, and whether it's learning basics of Excel or things, SQL is another one that might be more computer science oriented. Those are really easy skills to start learning that will be helpful. There are also, I know you guys all have tons of classes and homework, but if you want to take an extra online course on Excel or SQL on your own time, there are a couple free ones. You can do things like that. I think you're already doing it in terms of practicing presentations and writing skills, things like that you can do while you're at Middlebury will be helpful as well for skills. I think the last thing is just being willing to, whether it's volunteering, like again, it's just organizing events, practicing those type like soft skills will get you a really long way. A lot of in product management, you can learn about the industry when you already get there, when you're in the job. The things that are much harder to learn are those soft skills.
Are there any product management development programs within larger organizations that you suggest looking into?
Yes. So if you are interested in product right out of college, there are some programs that you can get a job at that will help you learn how to be a product manager. And so they're typically found at bigger companies rather than startups. But places like Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, Uber and Lyft both have them, Yelp. They all have what's called an associate product manager program. A lot of them are rotational, where they'll teach you the basic skills to be a product manager, and you don't have to go in with a technical computer science background. So they're definitely worth looking into. They have internship programs and full-time roles. where if you really want to do product right off the bat, try one of those programs. They'll be a little bit more structured, but you'll get all of the skills that you need rather than being self-taught at a startup.
Awesome. Very cool. I think one thing obviously that is shown with your experience and that you've touched on a lot is you don't need to be a computer science major to be a product manager. It can definitely help, but a lot of the pieces of the other stuff that we learn at Middlebury can really help set someone up to take on that role. Awesome. Do you have anything else that you really want to talk about?
I guess I would just say, going a little bit off of what you just said, you don't have to be a computer science major. I think liberal arts and working with a degree from Middlebury, especially in the humanities, is actually super relevant to being a product manager. In that you learn like my problem solving skills, critical thinking, being able to analyze whether it's documents or data at Middlebury, and like honestly just doing readings from Middlebury help you so much as a product manager, and being able to work on a team, whether it's group projects or being able to lead without influence. So as a product manager, I don't have direct control over my engineers. I'm not their boss. And I need to be able to lead and get them to do what I want without saying, you have to do this or you'll be in trouble. And so, which a lot of times at Middlebury, if you're working with whether it's teammates or club mates or something like that, you can't obviously be like, you have to do this or you're in trouble. It's like, let's present this cool idea that I have that I want to try and let's go do it. And those are skills that are really important no matter what you do. Product is also a role that I find interesting that I think Middlebury kids would, is because it's ever changing day to day. What I do every day changes and I'm not stuck in a monotonous 9 to 5. I clock in, clock out, do the same thing all day. I'm constantly talking to different people, doing different things, and Middlebury students, at least my friends from Middlebury, seem to be really interested in trying lots of things and learning while they're in their careers.
Caroline, thank you once again for your engagement in helping students to prepare for their first careers. We really appreciate having you out.
Thanks so much, Adam. It was great to chat with you.
So this concludes this episode within the series, Exploring Careers in Innovation. In closing, I want to encourage viewers to tune in to get career perspectives and advice from a number of professionals in a broad variety of organizations in our episodes, in our other episodes in this series. I also want to encourage you to tune into the other MIDDVantage series, which can be accessed through the Events and Programs tab on the CCI website. Thank you again, Caroline. Thank you everyone for watching. Have a good one.